In this video, we will continue musculoskeletal system. We will cover bone tissue. A bone is a complex structure shaped for its particular position in the skeleton and the stress it has to bear. Bone tissue, also known as osseous tissue. It is a specialized connective tissue that is mineralized and has an intercellular honeycomb-like matrix which helps to give the bone rigidity. Bone tissue is made up of different types of bone cells. Osteoblasts and osteocytes, they are the bone formation and mineralization cells. Osteoclasts, they are bone resorption cell. Modified or flattened osteoblasts, that is bone lining cells that form a protective layer on the bone surface. The mineralized matrix of a bone tissue has an organic component of mainly ossein, a form of collagen, and an inorganic component of bone mineral made up of various salts. Bone tissue is classified as combat or cortical bone and cancellous or trabecular or spongy bone and depends on how the bone matrix and the cells are organized. Although bones may also contain other kinds of tissue including bone marrow, endosteum, periosteum, nerves, blood vessels and cartilage. The amount of a cortical or trabecular tissue is dependent upon the function of the bone. The hard outer layer of bone is composed of a cortical bone, which is also called combat bone, as it is much denser than cancellous bone. The cortical bone gives bone its smooth, white and solid appearance and accounts for 80% of the total bone mass of an adult human skeleton. It facilitates bone's main functions to support the whole body, to protect organs, to provide levers for movement and to store and release chemical elements, mainly calcium. Cortical bone is covered by a periosteum on its outer surface and an endosteum on its inner surface. The endosteum is the boundary between the cortical bone and the cancellous bone. The primary anatomical and functional unit of cortical bone is an ostein. The combat bone forms an outer layer to all bones and most of the structure of long bones. It provides few spaces and offers protection and support to the bones as well as helping the long bones to bear the weight of the stress placed on them by body weight and is thickest in those places that receive the greatest stress. Its dense texture gives strength to the bone but makes it heavy. To the naked eye, combat bone appears solid, but on a microscopic examination, large number of Hessian system or osteons are seen. It consists of multiple microscopic columns, each called an osteon or Hessian system. Each column is multiple layer of osteoblasts and osteocytes around a central canal called the osteonic or Hessian canal. The columns are metabolically active, and as bone is reabsorbed and created, the nature and location of cells within the osteon will change. Combat bones have a central canal that helps to make up cylinder-shaped osteons or Hessian system. The osteon is the basic unit of structure of a combat bone, comprising a Hessian canal. Hessian canal containing blood vessels, lymph vessels, and nerves surrounded by concentrically arranged rings or plates of bones called lamellae. Between these are lacunae, tiny spaces containing tissue fluid and spider-shaped osteocytes that is called mature bone cells. At the junction of the lamellae are spider-shaped osteocytes occupying the lacunae. The tissue fluid nourishes the bone cells. Lacunae are small cavities that house mature bone cells called osteocytes. These osteocytes are connected to each other and to the bone surface through tiny canals called canaliculae, which allows them to receive nutrients and respond to mechanical signals, playing a crucial role in bone maintenance and repair. Thin hair-like canaliculae connect lacunae to each other and to the central Hessian canal. The tubular arrangements of lamellae gives bone greater strength than a solid structure of the same size. Bone cells called osteocytes occupy small chambers that is called lacunae that create concentric circles around central canals in bones. Some of the osteoblasts develop into osteocytes, each living within its own small space or lacunae. Osteocytes make contact with the cytoplasmic processes of their counterparts via a network of small transverse canals or canaliculi. Cellular processes passing through canaliculi allow osteocytes to communicate with other cells. This network facilitates the exchange of nutrients and metabolic waste. Collagen fibers in a particular lamella run parallel to each other, but the orientation of collagen fibers within other lamellae is oblique. The collagen fiber density is lowest at the seams between lamellae, accounting for the distinctive microscopic appearance of transverse section of osteons. Osteons or the central canals are connected to each other and the periosteum by oblique channels called Ockmann's canals or perforating canals, which contain larger nerves and blood vessels. The Ockmann's canal lie at the right angles to the long axis of the bone. They are not surrounded by concentric lamellae but are lined with endosteum. The osteons are parallel to the bone's long axis, aid in weight bearing, and are structural units of compact bone. Each osteon consists of a group of hollow tubes of bone matrix that appear like the rings in a tree trunk called lamellae. Each lamella lends its name to the other description of compact bone, which is lamellar bone. The collagen fibers of each lamella run in one direction, whereas those in nearby lamellae run in different directions. This alteration of a collagen fiber placement strengthens compact bone and resists twisting movements. Between collagen fibrils, bone salt crystals are also aligned with directional alterations. Bone tissue is mostly made up of collagen and inorganic salts such as calcium phosphate. Calcium phosphate interacts with the calcium hydroxide to form crystals of hydroxyapatite. These crystals incorporate various calcium salts as well as ions such as fluoride, magnesium, and sodium. During bone formation, the osteoblasts that secrete bone matrix surround blood vessels and stay in contact with each other, as well as nearby osteocytes via projections that extend outward. Each of these extensions contains gap junctions. As the matrix hardens, a system of canaliculi is formed, containing tissue fluid and osteocytes extensions. A mature osteon is then bound together, and both nutrients and waste can move from one osteocyte to the next. The bone matrix therefore allows bone cells to receive nourishment while it still remains hard and impermeable. However, some lamellae in combined bone are not part of complete osteons. The areas between the Hawaiian system contain incomplete interstitial lamellae that either fills gaps or are leftover structures of previous osteons that experienced bone remodeling, remains of older systems partially broken down during remodeling or growth of bone. The interstitial lamellae are the remnants of osteons that were partially resolved during the process of bone remodeling. Near the surface of a combined bone, the lamellae are arranged parallel to the surface. These are called circumferential lamellae. Deep to the periosteum, just superficial to the endosteum, are circumficial lamellae, which extend completely around the diaphysis, helping the long bones to resist twisting. The Hawaiian system forms during the process of endochondral ossification, which starts with the cartilage template that is gradually replaced by bone tissue. Osteoblasts, the bone forming cells, secrete the organic components of a bone matrix that is called osteoid and then initiates its mineralization. As osteoblasts become surrounded by the bone matrix, they differentiate into osteocytes, which reside in the lacunae and maintain bone tissue. The osteocytes connect to each other and the Hawaiian canal via tiny canals called canaliculi. The cancellous bone or spongy bone, also known as trabecular bone, is the internal tissue of the skeletal bone and is an open cell porous network that is composed of a trabeculated bone tissue. Cancellous bone is typically found at the ends of long bones like the femur, near joints, and in the interior of vertebrae, where the bone is actually not solid but is full of holes connected by thin rods and plates of bone tissue. The holes are the intertrabecular space and is occupied by red bone marrow, where all the blood cells are made, as well as fibrous tissue. Even though trabecular bone contains a lot of intertrabecular space, its spatial complexity contributes the maximum strength with minimum mass. It is noted that the form and the structure of a trabecular bone are organized to optimally resist loads imposed by functional activities like jumping, running, and squatting. Cancellous bone has a higher surface area to volume ratio than cortical bone and it is less dense. This makes it weaker and more flexible. The greater surface area also makes it suitable for metabolic activities such as the exchange of calcium ions. Cancellous bone is highly vascular and often contains red bone marrow where hematopoiesis, the production of blood cells, occurs. Thin formations of osteoblasts covered in endosteum create an irregular network of spaces known as trabecular. Within these spaces are bone marrow and hematopoietic stem cells that gives rise to platelets, red blood cells, and white blood cells. Spongy bone or cancellous bone has no osteons. Instead, spongy bone consists of an irregular lattice of thin columns of trabecular. Trabecular marrow is composed of a network of rod and plate-like elements that make the overall organ lighter and allow room for blood vessels and marrow. The primary anatomical and functional unit of a cancellous bone is trabecular. The trabecular are aligned towards the mechanical load distribution that a bone experiences within long bones such as the femur. Trabecular bone accounts for the remaining 20% of a total bone mass but has nearly 10 times the surface area of a compact bone. To the naked eye, cancellous bone looks like a honeycomb. Microscopic examination reveals a framework formed from trabecular, meaning little beams, which consist of a few lamellae and osteocytes interconnected by canaliculi. The spaces between the trabecular contain a red bone marrow that nourishes the osteocytes. The cells in spongy bones lie inside the trabecular supporting structures of dense tissue and takes the nutrients from diffused substance that enter the canaliculi. The trabecular are only a few cells thick. They have irregular lamellae and osteocytes interconnected by canaliculi, and no osteons are present. Nutrients reach spongy bones osteocytes via diffusion through the canaliculi from capillaries in the endosteum that surround the trabecular. Spongy bone gets its name because of the numerous small spaces within it and not because it is soft and sponge-like. It is neither as strong nor as heavy as compact bone because the spaces are filled with the red bone marrow or fat, which gives it a pinkish color. Most bones consist of both compact bone and spongy bone, thus optimizing the balance between strength, rigidity, and weight or mass. Trabecular bone is present in the interior of some bones and resists compression. Within the structure, there are osteocytes playing an important part in sensing local changes in strain. Bones provide the structure for muscles to attach so that we are able to move. Tendons are tough, inelastic bands that hold and attach muscles to bone. In the interior of bones is the bone marrow. Bone marrow is a site for hematopoiesis, the process by which the cellular components of blood are formed. Red bone marrow makes blood cells and yellow marrow stores fat. We will cover bone types. Bone types can be classified according to the shape and size of the bone. The shapes of bone reflect their functions. It is useful when describing specific bone to begin by stating the type of bone in relation to its shape. For example, the scapula is a large, flat, triangular bone. In terms of bone shapes, there are 5 main types of bone. They are long bones, short bones, flat bones, irregular bones, sesamoid bones. Short, irregular, flat and sesamoid bones have no shaft or extremities and are diverse in shape and size. For example, short bones, carpals, irregular bones, vertebrae and some skull bones. Examples for flat bones, sternum, ribs and most skull bones. Examples for sesamoid bones, patella or kneecap. Now we will see each type in detail. First one is long bones. Long bones have a long bone shaft with expanded ends and are much longer than they are wide and are named for their elongated shape instead of their actual size. For example, the 3 bones of each finger are long bones even though they are relatively small. All bones of the limbs are long bones except for patella, that is kneecap, and the bones of the wrist and the ankles. Long bones are located in the arms, legs, palms, soles, fingers and toes. Long bones are often curved to assist with strength. They are longer and wider than other bones and consist of a shaft and a variable number of extremities, that is endings. The femur, tibia, fibula, humerus, ulna and radius are examples of long bones. These consist of a shaft and 2 extremities. As the name suggests, the length is much greater than the width. Long bones have a diaphysis or shaft and two epiphyses or extremities. The diaphysis is composed of a combat bone with a central medullary canal containing fat yellow bone marrow. The epiphysis consists of an outer covering of a combat bone with a cancellous bone inside. The diaphysis and epiphysis are separated by epiphyseal cartilages which ossify when growth is complete. Thickening of a bone occurs by the deposition of new bone tissue under the periosteum. Long bones are almost completely covered by a vascular membrane, the periosteum. The outer layer is fibrous and the inner layer is osteogenic, containing osteoblasts, that is bone forming cells, and osteoclasts, that is bone destroying cells, which are involved in maintenance and remodeling of bones. It gives attachment to muscles and tendons and protects bones from injury. Hiding cartilage replaces periosteum on the articular surfaces of bones forming synovial joints. A medullary cavity is present in long bones as this region is not required to take any load or other stress, which makes the bone lighter without any loss of strength. The space contains bone marrow. Now we will see short bones. Short bones can be described small and often cube-shaped and approximately the same size, length and width. Their primary function is to provide support and stability with little movement. Examples of short bones are carpals seen in wrist and tarsals, which is found in foot or ankle bones. These bones consist of only a thin layer of combat hard bone with a cancellous bone on the inside with relatively large amounts of bone marrow. Now we will cover flat bones. Flat bones resemble plates with broad surfaces. It may be thin and slightly curved. Flat bones are very strong. Flat plates of bone whose key function is to provide protection to the body's vital organs as well as being a base for muscular attachment. A prime example of a flat bone is the scapula, that is called shoulder blade, the sternum, that is breastbone, cranium, that is skull, os coxae, that is hip bone, pelvis and ribs are also classed as flat bones. The anterior and posterior surfaces are formed of combat bone with the intention of providing strength for protection. The center consists of cancellous, that is spongy bone with various amounts of bone marrow. The greatest number of red blood cells are formed in flat bones in adults. The flat bones are located where extensive protection of underlying structures is needed, for example, sternum or skull. Next is irregular bones. Irregular bones have different and complex shapes and are often connected to other bones. These bones do not fall into any other category because of their non-uniform shape. They include many facial bones and those that make up the vertebrae in the spine, the pelvis and mandible, that is lower jaw. They consist chiefly of cancellous bone with a thin outer layer of combat bone. Irregular bones have unique shapes related to their function. Generally, irregular bone structure is similar to that of flat bones. Bone is composed of cells, protein matrix and mineral deposits. Next is sesamoid bone. These types of bones are mostly short or irregular bones, small, flat bones resembling sesame seeds that are most often located near joints within tendons of the hands, knees and feet. Sesamoid bones are usually present in a tendon where it passes over a joint. This provides protection for the tendon. The patella or kneecap is the most obvious example of this and sits within the patella or quadriceps tendon. Other types of sesamoid bones are the pisiform, smallest of the carpals, and the two small bones at the base of the first metatarsal. These types of bone may form in up to 26 locations in the body. Each individual has different numbers of sesamoid bones. Some help to control the directions in which tendons pull and some have unknown function. There is one more type, that is suturar bone, also known as Wormian bones. These are the small, flat and irregular bones between the flat bones of the skull. They range in size from as large as a quarter to as small as a grain of sand. Bones are constructed of cortical or cancellous bone tissue. Cortical bone exists in areas where support is needed, and cancellous bone is found where hematopoiesis and bone formation occur. For example, long bones are designed for weight bearing and movement and tend to be composed primarily of cortical bone, whereas flat bones, which are important sites of hematopoiesis and frequently protect vital organs, are made of cancellous bone layered between combat bones. Short bones consist of cancellous bone covered by a layer of cortical bone. Short, irregular, flat and sesamoid bones have a relatively thin outer layer of a combat bone with cancellous bone inside containing red bone marrow. They are enclosed by periosteum except the inner layer of the cranial bones where it is replaced by dura mater.